And very recently, I've started seeing more and more like content creators, especially people who are in kind of like the fashion space and who are plus size or who are fat, who have decided to kind of lose weight and go on like a weight loss journey, a fitness journey. And I've received such like vitriol and hatred from the fat activism, fat liberation community. And it's really taken a toll on like my respect for the community.
Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Before you get into the video, I apologize. There has not been that many videos recently. I'm getting over a sickness. I'm still feeling it a little bit today, but I wanted to record this video, so apologize for that. But today we are going to be talking about a video that was sent to me by one of you guys. Again, I appreciate you guys very much for doing that. Please always feel free to tag me on TikTok or send them to me on Instagram or whatever. It really does help out a lot. But this video was sent to me from TikTok, and it is this video right here, which is by Cassandra, and she is here telling her story about wanting to lose weight and kind of the fear that came from that because she was part of the body positivity fat acceptance community. But as you can see by this, what she wrote here in the description, she goes on to say, I've decided to lose weight. If this is triggering for you and you no longer want to follow me, that's totally cool. Much love. Protect your mental health. This video is long and vulnerable for me to make, and I've been in an anti-diet, body positive, fat liberation space for many years, but I need to prioritize my physical and mental health. And I've decided to change my body size, and eating habits is a big part of that. And so this is kind of, following a string of other creators that we've talked about. Actually, Megan Ann, who we talked about many years ago now, she makes, videos on YouTube now as well. There's a lot of similarities between this young lady and Megan that I thought was very interesting. And I think it just goes, again, to show what we've talked about so many times on this channel is that the fat acceptance, fat liberation spaces can be very helpful, and they can be a very kind of positive place for a little bit, but then after a while things start to get warped, and especially as people start to get older in their age, they start to realize that their weight is affecting their health and they would like to change it. And then because you've become so ingrained, it makes it really hard and difficult to want to leave those spaces or even want to lose weight, right? And so that's what we're seeing here. But let's go ahead and check out this video. Like she said, it's a little long, at least for a TikTok, but I think we'll go over most of it here in this video.
I just want to say that if you have followed me because of my like anti-diet, body positive, fat liberation content, and you don't want to hear about why I'm kind of like exiting that space, or you don't want to see me post things about like workouts and like fitness and wellness and like eating in a calorie deficit, please unfollow me, please block me. I am not here to hurt you or harm you. And I certainly don't want to argue with you. So, yeah, please like protect your peace, protect your mental health. It's okay. It's all good. Love you.
So, and I think that that's fair enough. It's fair enough for her to feel that way. And I think, honestly, it's even fair enough for people want to leave. It's once these things start getting kind of out of hand. And sadly, what we see a lot of times is there might not be someone in, the comment section here fighting with people, because I'm not seeing that when I look at the comments. But what you end up seeing is what I call like sub posting, right? So it's not like a kind of like a sub tweet, right? Where people will say, all these people are leaving the fat acceptance space, and this is what I feel about that. And then a lot of times it's basically responding to a larger creator. Now, this young woman, Cassandra, she doesn't have a huge following or anything like that. So it's not like this is like making waves and people are talking about it, right? But what we see often is that someone that is really popular and very known in the space that ends up saying, hey, I want to lose weight, that kind of makes people upset, and then they will start to make posts. And I'm assuming this creator has seen stuff like that themselves, and that's what they are trying to avoid. So, props, fair enough. I think that's fair to say.
I've been a part of like the intuitive eating, health at every size, anti-diet, and then like into like body positivity, fat liberation, fat activism for many years now. I mean, I entered this space in, I think, 2019. And it was really compelling to me at the time. I've struggled with my body my entire life. And when I say struggled with my body, some people are going to say like, oh, well, she just struggled being fat. But no, I struggled with my body. I have arthritis. I have a chronic illness since I was 5. So I was weight cycling due to needing prednisone and other medications that like directly affect your weight in your body since 5 years old. At the age of 5, I doubled my weight in 6 weeks due to prednisone.
That's tough, man. I can actually kind of relate to that because I had a similar experience when I was, I think, like 5 or 6. I actually had a hernia that landed me in the hospital that had to get removed, and then I had, I took like medication for it, probably painkillers and stuff, and like my life before that surgery and then my life after it was very different. And it was very strange because my mom even noticed it, and she started to have these like conspiracy theories. She felt that the medications they put me on, because maybe there's people out there smarter that maybe you can say whether or not that's true, but she felt like these medications that they put me on really made me spike up in weight because I was actually a relatively normal sized kid, straight sized kid, right? Skinny kid, whatever you want to say, up until I had this surgery. And then after the surgery, I started gaining weight pretty quickly, and then, gained it until I decided to lose the weight. But I remember it was like this, it like really scared my mom, and it kind of frustrated her as well. And she just didn't understand because I was, normally a normal straight sized kid. And then I have this surgery, and obviously I was bedridden for a while. I couldn't really get up off the couch for like, I don't remember how long it was, but for a period of time. And it was the only major surgery I've really actually had. And it really affected me, right? And it really kind of changed my life or trajectory or whatever. And so I can kind of relate, again, obviously not exactly the same thing. I can't imagine having a chronic illness like that. And so, I just can't even imagine that.
I was in the hospital. So like that is my background of just constantly being on this cycle of gaining and losing weight and like feeling uncontrolled and like out of control in my body. And also being, in a family that genetically struggles with things like diabetes, history of heart issues, a history of, being in bigger bodies. Like there are a lot of like fat people in my family. And with that comes a lot of specific feelings around food. And I really resonated with anti-diet language and sort of like theory in the past because I have struggled so much, the typical things of like growing up with your mom and Weight Watchers and like feeling like you were always going to be judged for your food and your body. And later on, like as I kept gaining weight, in the last, 6 years, I have gained 80 pounds.
Wow.
And I'm 5 feet tall.
Yeah, and I can relate to the growing up and just your weight being such a integral part of your mind. Like you just think about it all the time, right? I would think about it all the time. My mom, like she loved me so much, and she would try and help, right? But my mom was not educated in this stuff. She, we made bad decisions growing up as far as the food that we would eat, and there was a lot that went into that from, the poverty that we lived in and just the amount of time she didn't have with us because she was working a ton and we were home alone, and she had to stock the house with food that we could make ourselves, right? Like there was a lot, but I just remember she would always try and help. I've talked about the whole thing when she brought Slim Fast home from work, and I would drink it whenever I wanted because I just thought, oh yeah, drinking this will help me lose weight, right? That obviously didn't work. And like it was, I know what it feels like for your weight to be the topic of conversation, right? Like you hear your siblings, like my older siblings would come and like I would hear them talking to my mom and be like, this is not good, like we need to figure this out. And that's obviously very embarrassing. It's not like they would know that I was listening, but knowing that that's how they felt, it just was very embarrassing. And then there's the whole conversation now of like trying to have these conversations and talk about this with kids. I think it's important, like obviously weight and making sure that we're not getting to be 100 200 pounds overweight, 400 pounds overweight, whatever is important. But I think there is a way to do it with kids where you're not blaming them and putting the fault on them. And I don't have an answer. And I mean, I feel obviously this is a very complicated issue, but I think that the way that we are doing it now is not the way to go forward because it's not working.
That, as that happened to me, I really resonated with like fat liberation, fat activism, of kind of like feeling oppressed, feeling like the world was unkind to people in my body, and then, you know, doing research on how fat phobia is like linked to all of these other things, and, you know, all of the stuff that people, you know, always repeat about how
So kind of what she's talking about here, I assume, obviously I don't know for sure, but I think like talking about how like fat phobia and fat stigma and fat bias is actually the thing that causes people to have all of these problems because of their weight. So it's not this is what a lot of people in the fat activist space will say, is that it's not the actual weight that causes all of these issues like diabetes and all of these other things. It's the stigma that people face because they are overweight, which obviously I disagree with, right? But that's a lot of times what you will hear.
fat liberation movement and fat activism movement started, and it kind of like seemed like a no-brainer. Like, yeah, of course. And diets don't work, so like of course, and that is the world that I.
The diets don't work thing is understandable. I've talked about it a bunch of times. It's very frustrating because I feel like more than anything, yes, diets don't work, especially the way that a lot of times they are pushed, especially back in the day. But I do think that there is a way to make it work, right? Like I was able to do this, quote unquote, naturally. People don't like that term, but without medications, without surgery, anything like that, right? I was able to do it. And I've said this a million times. I don't think that I'm special. Maybe that there were certain circumstances that made it easier for me that I don't know about. Maybe that's the case. But like, as far as the things that I had access to and what I was able to do day in and day out, there was nothing special about what I had. And I mean, I was, you know, not well off my entire life. And so it's not like I had access to things that other people wouldn't have access to. It was actually the opposite of that. And I had no access to really anything. And so I understand like diets don't work, that argument, but I feel like I'm living proof of like, you can make it work, right?
lived in for 5 or 6 years. But living in a fat body, being fat at my height especially, was really, really hard. My mobility was tanking. I was in a lot of pain. My like POTS symptoms increased a lot, and my pregnancy in 2023 was extremely difficult. And, you know, a part of my pregnancy that was difficult, you know, maybe had nothing to do with my body, but a lot of it did, because carrying a larger than average baby in a petite frame, but having all of this excess body fat and not having like the strength and mobility because of my body size made my pregnancy really difficult. It was so bad that the whole time I was like, I never want to do this again. And now kind of like being almost 2 years postpartum and still struggling with like the last 10 pounds of baby weight, you know, and that's even still just to get back to 220, because 220 pounds is what I started being pregnant at 5 feet tall, was just really difficult. And I just kind of realized that like, yeah, actually my body is a big reason why I've been struggling. And
I think that that's so important, man, is being able to look at the facts and try and take your feelings and personal bias out of it as much as you can. I don't think that it's completely possible to do that, or it's very difficult to do that and be like, these are the facts, right? And it seems like that's what she's talking about. She says that she was 220 pounds pre-pregnancy, right? And 5 feet tall, it's, you know, that's a large ratio to height versus weight. And you're only going to gain weight for most people when they become pregnant. And that definitely affects pregnancy and how you feel, especially when you're pregnant. Like, so I can only imagine what it would feel like as being a woman that, you know, maybe wants more children, and having the fear of how that pregnancy felt hinder you from wanting to do something that you maybe feel, you know, maybe you want to have 3 kids, or so you're going to have to go through most likely 3 pregnancies unless you have twins, right? Like, that's a terrifying thought, right? And so, you know, props again.
that is something that I, you know, do have a modicum of control over. There's a lot in these spaces about.
Amen, man. I love that. You do have a modicum, or however much you feel you have control over, but like the fact is that there is things that are within your control when it comes to your weight that you should always be like, I can control this. There might be a ton of things out of my control, but I can control this. And let me see what I can do about the things that I can't control. I love that.
how diets don't work and everybody, 95% of people gain the weight back, and the binge restrict cycle is why you like have binge eating tendencies in the first place. And I've just kind of come to the conclusion that that's not true for me. Specifically the latter part, that no amount of like food freedom has healed me from my binge eating tendencies.
This is so important, man. This is so important. This is such a good video. She did a fantastic job. The argument that you hear a lot from people that are like the fat activism, fat liberation spaces is that another part of why people struggle with their weight is because of the binge restrict cycle, right? The reason people gain weight is because they have this guilt about eating certain foods, and then that guilt about eating certain foods makes them like maybe overeat and then binge and restrict, and then that is the thing that causes them to gain weight. So if instead you just say, I can have whatever I want and I can eat intuitively and do whatever I want, then your weight will stabilize and you'll be at the weight that your body is supposed to be at. I don't think that that's legit. Like, I don't think that that really works, especially in today's day and age with the foods that we have access to, the hyper palatable, super calorically dense foods that we have at our disposal. We have to use some discretion, and maybe some people have to use a food scale. Maybe some people have to count their calories. Maybe even they have to count their macros, right? That's just a fact that some people have to go through. And I'm not saying that you have to do that forever, because I am a big proponent of what I call mindful eating, which is, this is not like a scientific term. This is something that I made up with my YouTube PhD, where you use the tools that you learn through the tracking that you've done with tracking calories, macros, whatever you have done to lose the weight. You use that stuff that you have learned. And I'm not saying this is going to work for everybody, but this is what I've done. Those things that I've learned, I can now bring that into how I eat today. And I don't have to use a food scale with every single thing that I eat. I don't have to worry about the macros, because all of the things I've learned over the years of tracking and doing all of that, I can now bring that into my mindful eating approach. And so I don't have to feel like I'm basically like a slave to these different, things that you would use to lose the weight. And I feel like that's really important, and it can be very helpful.
And I did everything right. I've been doing this for 6 years. I've worked with a registered dietitian for years. And she was amazing, incredible. Like, I really loved her. But like, that didn't help me. Like, working with like the HAES framework and the intuitive eating framework did not help me. And I think that a part of it is because I don't think everyone can intuitively eat. I think there's a lot of things that go into that.
It's important, man. I agree 100%. The HAES Health at Every Size framework of intuitive eating, I think, is really a lot of times meant for a very specific person. A lot of times it's from people that are coming from the opposite end of the spectrum, where they are severely restricting themselves and underweight. And a lot of times when we look at dietitians, and this is not me trying to crap on dietitians or anything like that, but a lot of times people that are dietitians are recovered ED, right? They are recovering from an ED, or they have recovered from an ED. And a lot of times those EDs are very restrictive EDs, right? And so disordered eating type of things, right? And so a lot of times the things that worked for them great, fantastic. I'm glad that they're in a better place. But you can't use that same framework and try and use it for most people that are on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, where they are eating too much and they're overeating, and food is their freedom, and it makes them feel happy, and it makes it like they're using it as a coping mechanism for whatever reason, trying to just tell that person, well, you just need to eat intuitively and enjoy the foods that you have. I just don't think it works for those people. And it seems that she kind of had the same experience here.
History of like overeating, a history of weight cycling due to medication, a history of eating a lot of processed foods that are, designed to like hack your brain, being neurodivergent and struggling with that kind of stuff. There's a lot of links between that. And I also have recently been doing more research into a lot of these talking points, because I kind of saw a lot of them as like taking them at face value, right? Like we read one paper that is like a review of things, and then we just decide that that is truth.
And a lot of times the people in the fat acceptance movement speak with such authority, you feel like, oh, they have to be right because of what they're saying, and the way that they're saying it makes so much sense, right?
And what I started to realize is that it's not truth, or that it's not necessarily the whole truth. Like, I think that a lot of people don't know that those numbers are based off of a study in the 1950s that had very specific parameters and is again from 75 years ago. And like, I know multiple people in my life who have maintained, you know, large weight loss. And it's, yeah, like it's just, you put in the work. And yeah. And very recently, you know, I've started seeing more and more like content creators, especially people who like are in kind of like the fashion space and who are plus size or who are fat, who have decided to kind of lose weight and go on like a weight loss journey, a fitness journey. And I've received such like vitriol and hatred from the fat activism, fat liberation community. And it's really taken a toll on like my respect for the community. Because I can't take you seriously if you like literally come online and say, you know, if you lose weight, you're dead to me. Like,
Yeah, dude. Yeah, good for you.
what? Or even like this idea that, you know, fat people existing online and like doing plus size fashion, like that being their content creation, that means that they are like a body positivity fat liberation advocate, and them deciding to do something, you know, to change their bodies, that means that they're like betraying you. Like, I just started to feel like the community online was very culty, and I felt afraid. I felt like I could not make a choice about my body without receiving large amounts of like hatred. And that is when I realized that there was like a huge problem here. Because if I can't make a choice for my body, if I can't do something for my body because I'm afraid of like what people in the community is going to think of me, that no, no. And as I did more research into like the fat liberation, fat activism movement and how it started in the US, the fact that it was started by two thin white guys who just like, they liked fat women, and they like to the point where the NAFA, like the National Fat Activism, like that started basically, in my opinion, as like a fetish like organization of kind of trying to normalize being sexually attracted to fat women. And you can do your research. I'm not saying that that is what the movement is now. Like, obviously the movement is very diverse, and I do respect and agree with a lot of the tenets, but I don't want to be fat anymore. And so I'm not going to be. Love you.
I mean, so I feel like, she made a lot of good points. Obviously, we talked about those. And I think it's just so interesting, man, that people come out here and they almost feel like they have to make an announcement, right? That they are going to lose weight. And that's not me trying to attack you, right? And, you know, people will be like, well, I didn't have a problem with people trying to lose weight. But most of the time, right, when someone that is in the fat acceptance space, that's literally a bigger person, and figuratively, like as far as their platform online, when they come out and say it, like they definitely have to say it a certain way, and they have to mention it a certain way, and they have to, you know, like say everything in a very specific way so people will still support them. And that's what I've noticed is like people are like, well, it's just the way that this person went about it. And it's like, they're very particular in who they will support when they are losing weight versus who they don't want to support when they are losing weight. And I find that to be incredibly interesting. I thought this video was fantastic. I will link the whole thing down in the description so you guys can go check it out. Maybe give, I think her name's Cassandra, a follow if you want. If you're not going to leave anything kind, please don't go to their page, obviously. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. When I watched it the first time, I was like, I definitely want to talk about this. That was a few days ago, but again, I've been deathly ill, so we're on the upswing now. But I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.